Welcome to Tenacity with Sonia C, the podcast where entrepreneurs, founders, and ambitious professionals come to learn from those who have walked the path, navigating challenges and achieving success. Whether it's thriving in business, pivoting, scaling for growth, fundraising, or finding work-life balance, dealing with loneliness, adversity, or overcoming personal struggles. Our guests share the insights and strategies that have empowered them to level up. I'm your host, Sonia, and let's get started. My guest today is Lindsey Epperly. Lindsey is the founder and CEO of Jetset World Travel, who not only survived a dramatic industry crisis, but emerged stronger. Lindsey shares her unique MBA I never wanted, detailing how she transformed adversity into thriving opportunities and how embracing the illusion of control reshaped her business and personal life. Whether you're an entrepreneur facing your own challenges or a professional seeking inspiration, Lindsey's insights are sure to enlighten and motivate. Hi, Lindsey. Welcome to the show. How are you today?
Hey, Sonia, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to get into this conversation and learn a little bit about you, your journey, and everything that you're doing in the business world. Uh,
Thanks.
so, to get started, can you introduce yourself and tell us what led you to found Jet Set World Travel?
Yeah. So, hey, listeners, I'm Lindsey Epperly. I am the founder and CEO of Jetset World Travel. Technically, I'm the founder of something called Epperly Travel. That's who we were when we first founded 10 years ago. We wound up actually acquiring another company, Jetset World Travel, in the middle of the pandemic.
Oh,
So
wow.
I've only ever been in the travel industry. I walked in for a brochure when I was 19 and I accidentally walked out with a job. And then since then, I've just looked around, seen ways to innovate, seen problems to solve, and have built the business around that.
So, you described your journey through what you call the MBA you never wanted, losing your home and navigating significant challenges while growing your business. Could you share more about the experience and what kept you going during those tough times?
Yeah. I think for listeners, especially anyone that can relate as a founder, right? We have this sometimes unhealthy relationship with our business where we tie our self-worth and our to our success. And I had very much unknowingly done that and had this, amazing business that had only ever been upward and to the right. And so I was only ever upward and to the right. And the travel industry, as many industries, were not fun to be in the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah.
So overnight, business was absolutely leveled. From a personal perspective, that affected me because my husband is also my business partner. He was working in the business at the time. We were not yet partners yet, but we were married and we were expecting our first child and had our first home under contract. So March of 2020, that was a little glimpse of what my life looked like. And then we had to start making the painful decisions of, do we keep this home or do we keep this business? And the things that kept me going, because I'm a very emotionally driven, right-brained individual, right? So every day it kind of felt like a up, down, up, down. Am I going to stay in it or am I going to, do I listen to the burnout that I've been feeling for so long and just light it all on fire and walk away, which is not a responsible place to be in. Thank God I had my husband who is super level-headed, operates everything on a spreadsheet. From day one of the pandemic, he's got spreadsheet titled Project Slim Fast. It's all about how do we reduce expenses and ensure our run rate lasts. And then it was a situation of like, okay, well, now government funding has come in. And so we can last another 3 months. Well, now this has come in and we can last, we've got the savings from the home. We can last this long. And so it was kind of in order to stay with it and to stay hopeful, it was both and. It was the facts of the matter, which were laid out to us on a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet did not lie. I have a hard time believing a spreadsheet because I'm such an emotionally driven person. So there was the emotional side of which was we had this mission within our company, which was to be a beacon during the industry's darkest hour. And so stepping up as a leader and leaning into that mission, and then also understanding the vision that my husband and I had for our family, which was freedom and flexibility through entrepreneurship, we knew if we stick with this and we stay the course, we will see positive results on the other side. The other side could be 3 months. It could be 24. It was much closer to the 24 number, but we were able to really turn some major obstacles into opportunities because of that mindset.
So making it onto the Inc. 5,000 list of is no small feat, especially after quadrupling your company during a crisis. What strategies did you implement to achieve such remarkable growth?
Yeah, thanks. It was so interesting because going into the pandemic, before we knew we were going into a pandemic, I had a couple of goals for myself from a professional standpoint, right? One was to double the size of the company, and one was to land on the cover of our industry's biggest magazine called Luxury Travel Advisor. And I said, I want to reach these things by the time I'm 40. And I was like early 30s. And because of the pandemic, we actually achieved both of those goals in less than 2 years. So we had this unbelievable growth, and we also had the achieving of personal goals on a much quicker trajectory because of what could have and should have been perceived as a major obstacle. And so when I think back to how do we quadruple, how do we wind up on Inc. 5000, it was because both organic growth, since we were putting out that hopefulness and that beacon light to others in the industry, others were attracted to that, and we grew organically through it. And then two, it was turning obstacles into opportunities and kind of seizing opportunities that came along. So I mentioned at the start that we were previously known as Epperly Travel, which was the company I founded. And in early 2021, we had the incredible opportunity to acquire Jetset World Travel, which was another boutique female-founded business. I super admired them. I adored their founder. I considered her like who I wanted to be when I grow up, right? She had been in the business longer than I had. The company was larger. But she had never found an operations person, whereas I happened to marry my operations person. So we had that and we had it in place, and we realized we could bring something to the table when we found out that they were an opportunity. And we were able to acquire and then create a stronger platform for existing Jetset that then strengthened existing Epperly Travel. And we brought those two things together. And through that momentum, continued organic growth was still happening. So that was what led to the eventual landing on the Inc. 5000 list.
That's amazing. I mean, most of the conversations I have with people is during COVID, businesses struggled and, just to stay afloat. But I can relate to you because one of my startups took off during COVID. We saw a tiny little opportunity and we pivoted and we're like, now we've blown up because of COVID almost.
Cool.
So what was it during that time? A lot of people were discouraged. They were struggling to pivot or to bring in more business. How did you find I mean, I know you acquired, but what did you do to keep bringing business in?
Yeah. It didn't look like traditional business because planes were grounded and we were not able to send people on vacations for months and months at a time, right? And so any glimmer of hope, as soon as something would open up and individuals were comfortable, we would start sending travelers in that way. But something that we did that didn't directly result in, immediate revenue at the time, but it ultimately led to so much of our growth is we saw the opportunity. We saw a number of advisors and agency owners who just felt so despondent and were like, who do we look to during this time? What do we do? And we realized we have an awesome team who has a big, big heart for community and for serving. And we could be who people are looking for during this time, right? Like we could cast that light. And so that was that whole idea of let's be a beacon. And we created a short-term community group called Nourish, where we basically said, all right, Epperly Travel is meeting multiple times a week where we are trying to solve these problems together. We are being there for each other from an emotional standpoint. We're learning together. Let's just open the doors to whoever wants to come in. And so we created this community group that then brought in competitors, both from the agent level and the ownership level, because everyone wanted that community during that time. So that was something that, I couldn't look at as someone who likes instant gratification. I couldn't look at it and say, all right, this added $1,000 to our bottom line today. But from a leadership standpoint, and I think COVID really, really refined me in my leadership position, it was invaluable. And then from the opportunity standpoint, it allowed us to, start seeing, well, where are there opportunities? Because individuals are coming to us now and saying, oh, I like what you're doing. And, that was actually what ultimately led to that acquisition.
Wow, love it. So you speak passionately about the illusion of control. Can you explain this concept and how it has influenced your professional and personal life?
Yeah. So I think my biggest learning lesson during this time of having a business that was absolutely leveled, and I think we can learn this lesson, hopefully we can learn it during times where that's not the case, but usually it takes something bigger to kind of pry those of us who are control freaks to pry our cold dead hands off of what we're doing.
I know the feeling.
You feel it? Control Freaks Anonymous president over here. Yeah. So, asking for a friend. I feel that too. And I remember a mentor of mine, it was the end of 2019. I was on a call with her. I was trying to decide whether I wanted to bring on my husband as my business partner. So I was having a candid call with her. And she said, Lindsey, the tighter you cling, the slower you're going to grow. And I remember her saying that, and it's super, super powerful. And it would be awesome if I could have just like synthesized it right then and there and not had to go through everything to actually understand it. But most of the time, those learning lessons, you can never be told you have to actually understand them.
Yeah.
So when I think about that, the tighter you cling, the slower you grow. My business boomed because I was able to start letting go of some of that control. And in some ways, that looked like delegation, right? So, from the very tangible standpoint, it looked like I'm moving out of the main practitioner role. I had been a solopreneur for years and years and years, and I'm moving into a CEO and leadership role. From a personal standpoint, I think that our control manifests in a number of ways, whether that's perfectionism or that is imposter syndrome, right? Like the little gremlins that get in our head, especially the more we succeed. You'd think the opposite. You'd think like the more you succeed, the better those things become. But I think sometimes it's the more you succeed, the lonelier that becomes. And then you start becoming more isolated and hearing those voices, for lack of better words. And those are just a manifestation in my mind of how I try to control the scenario.
I totally get that. And I talk about this a lot where a lot of people that I'm just not on the podcast, but just having conversations, and I'm like, you know, during my journey, it's been really lonely. And people are always like, what do you mean? Like you have people that you work with, you have a team. I'm like, you don't understand. Like there comes a time where you reach a point where you can't go to those people to rely on them and to just have a candid conversation because they have expectations of you as the founder or the leader, and you almost can't show that you're vulnerable or that you're scared or that you're lonely. And no, not that you're lonely, that you're vulnerable and scared. And then that leads to the loneliness, right?
Yes. Yes. I feel that in my soul. Honestly, Sonia, that's why I started a podcast too, because I
Yeah.
was like, I'm tired of feeling lonely in this. And I
Mm.
titled the podcast, Who Made You the Boss? Because I feel like when you feel those symptoms essentially so frequently, and then you're like, well, I can't talk to someone about it because then they'll know that I have this weakness or this vulnerability. I'm
Yeah.
kind of done with that. I'm kind of like, I'm over the fake it until you make it kind of hustle culture and would rather just candidly have conversations. And what's been so cool as I have these conversations with like very influential people that from the outside looking in, we would all think, well, they've got it all and they've never had to deal with this. And they're willing to admit, actually, I've had to deal with that a lot. And now my team listens to those things. And they, I think, feel more comfortable in their own skin with their own insecurities because they're hearing it modeled via their leadership. So I do think, I mean, of course, you can't just come to the table with like, here's all my issues and just lay them all out. But I do think there's a happier medium, especially as female founders, where we really tap into our intuition and we can say, actually, that hurt a little bit and I need to talk about it.
Yeah, I just needed a place to vent sometimes, and I would always go to my old boss. He's still a good friend of mine, and sometimes I'd be like, "Can we just do lunch?" And he's like, "Do you need to vent?" He already knows. When I reach out, I'm like,
Yes.
"Hey," he's like, "Let me guess, you need to vent," and I'm like, "Yes, I need to vent."
Yes.
Yeah, because people like my team just doesn't understand my frustrations. They don't
Mm.
understand why I make decisions, why I'm doing what I'm doing, and it's not just about going, going day to day. It's about really the bottom line, and we're trying to achieve something here, and there are things that are going to go right, there are things that are going to go wrong, and you're not superwoman, right? You have
Right.
vulnerabilities just like everyone else, but it's hard not to be able to show that.
It is. And I thought for a while that maybe I could find a kinship in masterminds or like mastermind type groups where you kind of are set with other peers.
Yeah.
And while I made some really wonderful friends from that and I have some super authentic relationships that were blossomed from it, for the most part, even in the peer-to-peer groups, what I found is everyone's kind of trying to prove themselves a little bit. And so there's even a worse feeling of being like, actually, I'm sad and lonely. Like those are
Oh my
sometimes even
God, yes.
scarier to come to the table with that emotion.
I did the same thing. And then I found that like the table I was at, everyone had support. Everyone
Yeah.
had
Oh,
someone to
really?
go to. And I'm like, I think I'm here for the wrong reason.
That's hysterical. Well, then what did their support look like? And were you able to implement that? Like, what did you learn from that type of experience?
I honestly I took it just to really better myself in business and become a better leader, I wasn't able to use that platform to talk about, the loneliness and
Yeah.
the struggles I was having with myself emotionally. It was more about business. This is
Yeah.
how you need to build your sales team. I did that, and these were the results. It was more results driven. It wasn't about like, hey, I feel like crap today, or I had a really
Yeah.
crappy month or week or year.
I guess that's what a good therapist is for, or at least that's the only thing that I've found to be able to be helpful because it is so, and even in that case, it's like not someone that necessarily understands the ins and outs of running a business, which is what you want.
Yeah.
Um, Honestly, marrying my business partner was helpful in that way.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. I do find what's helped me is uh, I do a lot of networking, and I found a women in business sort of support group where it's just women founders who are sort of focusing on building relationships, because what they said was, our friends are not in the same business as we are. They're employees. They don't have that level of responsibility. So they felt like they couldn't have those conversations with them because they just wouldn't understand them.
Yeah.
So one of the ladies sort of started this group, and it's now grown into like hundreds of women, and they have events like every month. And when I go and I do the networking, you're having conversations with people that are like, haha, I know exactly what you're talking about. I went through
Yes.
the same thing last week. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. You know what's interesting though? I think something I've become really hyper obsessed with is this idea that we have all of these feelings, and a lot of times we kind of begrudge ourselves. We think like this is a bad thing to feel, or this is, like men don't feel this in business, or what is this and why is it here?
Yeah.
And I've started really flipping the script on that for myself and saying, okay, actually, if imposter syndrome is present, maybe it's actually a good thing. Like maybe this is telling me that I'm doing the right thing. Like you wouldn't have it if you were not stepping outside of your comfort zone, right? Or like maybe burnout is actually a sign for me to evolve instead of just a symptom of overwork. Like maybe there are things that I can tap into from an intuition standpoint that outwardly we perceive as negative, but are actually helpful little kind of like indicators for us to listen to.
Yeah, it's true. And I'm in tech, and it's a very male dominated space, and I always hear, "Oh, you're too emotional. You're too emotional." So I think it's also really good to be around other women, because I don't think women are emotional, but we're not sensitive. We care. We
Yeah.
care about people, about things, like the other day I heard that two people on my team were talking negatively about a decision I had made, and another one was talking about something he wasn't happy about. And when I found out about it, I was really hurt, because
Mm-hmm.
number one, I wasn't made aware that they were feeling this way. Number two, I'm like, they're talking bad about me behind my back. It
Yes.
hurts. It's like,
Yeah.
oh,
It
I'm
does.
I'm doing my best to like make sure you're all happy, and I'm working
Yeah.
really hard to, you know, get us to where we need to be. And oh, it hurt. It really hurts.
It does. It does. And I think it's just that we care differently because I see this with my husband also running the day to day of the business and interesting conversations that I've had with him lately because I like kind of try to study his brain like a scientist to figure out like how do you show up without crying? And it's just that men are really good at compartmentalizing.
Yeah.
And you and I were actually talking about this before we pressed record of like you have an entire medical journey that you had when you founded your company. I had a medical journey that disrupted my life right after we acquired another company. And I think that perhaps if I was a male and had gone through that, I would have been able to keep those parts of my life separate. But because I mean, it's just like as a female, I show up and I feel like, and I shouldn't just say male and female, everyone is unique in the way that they do it. So I shouldn't like, a stereotype here, but just meaning like I have a hard time compartmentalizing. I have a hard time not showing up as the whole person that I am every single day.
Yeah.
And so even during that medical journey, like I showed up and shared what was happening and shared like not in a burdensome way or in a way that people needed to be concerned, but just fact of the matter, I need to keep you guys aware of. And it actually, I think, strengthened my relationship with my team from a leadership standpoint because I was willing to be real and authentic and to know that this is deeper than business because this is my life.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. And I do think it has an impact on the team to see you being vulnerable and authentic. Definitely will change things a little bit, especially when it
Yeah.
comes to like illness, right?
Yeah.
I
Yes.
found that when I was the same way. I was very authentic about it, and I was really shocked that my team just stepped up because I was going to have to take time off for I had 4 surgeries and treatments, and I was scared that if I'm not here and I'm not doing these things, the company's going to struggle. And I was able to delegate, and things were getting done, and my team, like, they stepped up to really help and get things done. And the company did really well during that time.
I found the same thing. And I think that goes back to the conversation about the illusion of control, right? Like those are the like kind of life-altering moments where one, a new priority is coming into play, which is this business that has always been my top priority can no longer be because now I have to take care of myself medically. Or for me, I had these same things happen during becoming a mother, right? Like, and now I have to be prioritizing my family and my child. And you have those shifts in priorities and you realize your team wants the opportunity. Like you have individuals, if you've hired in the roles that you need, you have individuals who are like, actually, I would rather do this without you looking over my shoulder
Yeah. Oh
constantly.
my
This is
gosh,
great
yes.
for me. So
It's so true. They do. And
yeah,
they love, like, the freedom to, hey, this person trusts me to do this. And if you don't micromanage them, I find that they usually do a better job.
totally. Something that we tried this year, and I already see it working so fabulously, is we have a leadership team that we bring on a retreat once a year. And we this year decided to craft a mission statement together for that leadership team. So meaning that my husband and I, who, sit as CEO and COO, basically introduced the concept, but let them have the whiteboard and the pen and the room, the speaking floor. Like we're not trying to influence the ways one way or the other. We're letting them lead what they think that the vision and mission should be for their combined roles.
Yeah.
And to see them develop this, where like every word was carefully curated because it reflected what they felt for our company that
Yeah.
they are such a part of, that they also have a real deep desire to see succeed. And now we have that statement that we can go back to, and they feel this sense of ownership in it. That's been a really cool way of leveling up and seeing the way that people really will care about the business that you founded in ways that you didn't realize was possible.
It's true. I totally agree with you. So before we run out of time, I just want to ask you a couple more things. So you've developed the cadence of control framework. Did I pronounce that correctly?
The cadence of
Cadence
control.
of control framework. Okay. Could you describe this framework and how it can help others in their professional journeys?
Yeah. So I talk about this a lot on my podcast on Who Made You the Boss, because I think that when we understand kind of what it takes to let go of control consciously,
Hmm.
then we can better ourselves in a way that even if it's not actually happening, if you're not in like the worst of times, but maybe you're having an experience where you're like, gosh, I know I am the bottleneck here, right? Like we can just start reframing the way that we're doing things. And so I talk about this as kind of the stages of how we go through that, which is we have our routine, right? Like we have the way that we're used to doing things, call these our habits. And then usually there is some sort of instigating occurrence that causes us to actually re-examine that routine. And so it's something like for us, it was a pandemic leveling the business, but it's something that causes like a change in that routine. And
Hmm.
then you have the opportunity to retrain. So those bad habits that you might have had, that whether it's people pleasing or listening to that imposter syndrome voice, like now you have this opportunity to say, all right, when that arises again, because I've been forced to re-examine it, I'm going to retrain myself to respond differently. And for us, that leads to the fourth R, which is redemption. Like it's all about leading to that redemption story and leading to the moments where you can say, oh, actually, I was able to let go of control in this area because I went through this framework to be able to kind of coach myself out of the same habits I've been in and day out.
Okay. And could you share a specific failure where you experienced in your career that you experienced in your career and the lessons you learned from it that could inspire our listeners?
Yeah. So thinking about failure, there have been a lot,
I love
right?
failures because you learn from them. So I always try to touch base on one with
Yeah.
one of my speakers.
I completely agree. I mean, I completely agree. And I think the reason that I kind of like am chewing on this question is because I think of that time of the business being leveled as my biggest failure.
Ooh.
And yeah, interestingly, right? Or at least I did when I was in it. I don't think of it that way anymore. But in it, when you're just like blinders and all you see is the negative, right? Negative dollars, negative situation, negative mindset. It's hard not to feel like that's a failure, especially, and I mentioned this earlier, I had so closely tied my self-worth to my success.
Mm.
And I tell a story pretty often. I told this recently on my podcast about how at the end of 2020, I went on this entrepreneurship retreat on a private island that I had always dreamed of going on. And the only way that we could even afford to do this is we had paid for it in 2019. So when we were up and to the right, when we thought that everything was going to be great, like we paid for this retreat and we're like, oh my God, now we have to go on it. And business is just like completely in the gutter, right?
Yeah.
So I remember being at this place and just looking around and being like, should I write failure on my forehead? Like, can everyone already just tell that we run a travel agency in a world pandemic? Of course, we're not doing well. And so I just felt such massive insecurity being surrounded by all of these people who had incredible businesses, were incredible people. These are like Tony Robbins inner circle people, like, and that I'm like so intimidated by because I'm actively failing. And
Yeah.
it took me a while, Sonia, when we think about like lessons learned, because that just sounds like, wah, wah, sad. I was on a private island, whatever. But what I learned about that, because I was just a shell of myself at the time, is I was experiencing such deep imposter syndrome that
Mm.
I learned I could actually confront that and turn that into ways that I could rocket fuel my own business, right? That I could actually say, oh, when that shows up, I really need to take, it's just what I went through with the 4R framework of like, I need to take a look at where am I clinging too tightly? And also, I think when we've experienced imposter syndrome to that degree, it can be a little bit ego driven, where it's like, not everyone's looking at you, Lindsey. Like, not everyone is focusing on your quote unquote failure. Really, if you had to ask, you're probably the one that feels it the most. You're 100% the one that feels it the most. And I remember that just being such a defining instance because I felt like I was comparing myself so much to all of these others who were actively succeeding while I was actively failing.
Yeah.
And and it took me a while to learn from that, honestly. I remember coming back from that trip and which was just this crazy story. It got cut short due to COVID. We had to like escape the island. It was wild. I tell this full thing on the podcast because it was just it's like out of a movie. But it took me months to recover from it, from being like, why did I feel like such a failure there? And I think it's because I tied so many hopes and dreams to what that meant. And because I tied my self-worth to my success, that's why I felt it so deeply there.
I think also like you look at other people who are doing what you're doing. I do this a lot and I'm like, well, they're so successful. I want to be them. I want to get to that point. But you don't know what they're going through and their failures and their struggles. You just see what's on the surface. So it's so easy to be like, oh, they're so successful and they're doing it all and I want to be there too. Ah, damn it.
Yes, totally. And like, they run a business that was not impacted by the pandemic, and I run a business that was only impacted. I mean, like,
Yeah.
it's silly, but when we get in that mindset, I
Yeah.
mean, comparison is the thief of joy, as they say, and that's really, really true.
But I always think about it. I'm like, if I'm looking at someone like that, someone is looking at me that way.
Mm,
They don't know
yes.
my struggles and the fact that I feel that way about other people, right? So there's always
Yeah.
someone looking at you feeling probably the same way. That's why I think it's so good I think it's important to, at some point in your career, pay it forward, give back in
Mm-hmm.
some way, whether it's in a big way or in a small way. Like for me, I became part of a mentorship program for
Oh.
women only. And, I take on a couple mentees, not that many, but for me, it's important to just, hey, you know what? I wish I had had this because I
Mhm.
remember it's so easy. Everyone's like, get a mentor. Okay. Can we please talk about how hard it is to get a mentor? But everyone's like, oh yeah,
Totally.
go get a mentor. And I'm like, where am I going to go to get a mentor? Can you
Right.
tell me the website, the place?
Yeah.
Like,
Just pick one up from Office Depot. No problem.
hello. So I wanted to make myself available so that people could have access to the things that I wanted, right? So I think
Yeah.
it's important to sort of think about that and give back as well, right?
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. Completely agree. And I think that's honestly, that's why I wanted to even come on Tenacity. Like, I think that what you're doing and what you're talking about is so important because we do need to have that sense of grit and that sense of tenacity, but we also need to see that other people have done it
Yeah.
and know that that's what can provide us hope during those times. So if like someone's listening right now and they are going through that season of obstacle where they're like, was this whole thing worth it, or should I just burn it to the ground? Right? Like when you
Yeah.
have those tough decisions, to know that there is hope in spite of the outcome, right? No matter what choice you make, you at least get to be in the seat of making that decision. And so there is a level of this, kind of like we went through with the pandemic, where you can make those informed decisions without completely losing faith.
Yeah. And I think it's also different than going to like a conference and seeing someone on stage and it's like they're up on stage in these fancy chairs and it's like, oh, I can never be that person. I can never speak to that person. But this is more like at the end of each episode, I make sure that, you share your information so that people listening can have access to you to either email you and ask you a question. And, our speakers, I always encourage them to, hey, you're giving back, be
Yes.
available.
Yeah.
So I think that's important to make people feel like, hey, you're not so up there that I can't even reach out and ask a
Yeah.
question. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think it's important to just, why are people making the exact same mistakes that you already made? Yes, they're going to
Yes.
make them, but now they have an example of how to overcome it or some strategies on how they might be able to, implement new ideas based on the feedback that you're giving them, right?
Yeah.
Not in
Yeah.
code anymore, but the things that you did were pretty freaking good ideas. So someone else can apply it as well, right? It might be
Yeah.
a completely different business, but it's all about how you think and how you go about it. And we can learn from people who have been doing it for a long time.
Totally. Totally. I appreciate this conversation. I wish I would have had it myself a few years ago.
Yeah, right. So before we wrap up, I just want to ask you one last thing. As you look forward, what are your inspirations for your company? And you have an upcoming book, so can you share a little bit about that? And what should we all be looking out for?
Yeah, thanks for asking on all of that. So, in terms of, well, the book I can't speak to a whole lot yet because I'm still in the publishing journey, which is a long haul. So, listeners, if you've been through it, you let me know because I love hearing from other people who are encouraging because it is a slog.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the upcoming goals, besides the book, the big goal for Jetset this year is to amplify, and it's to get the voices out of our travel advisors, of the travel advisor story, the fact that the travel agents even still exist, right? Like that we are kind of stronger than ever on the other side of this pandemic, and making sure that the story of Jetset and the credibility of Jetset is out there. And so just you having me on this show has been a huge, step toward that goal, which I really, really appreciate.
Awesome. I love it. And where can people find you, reach out to you? Can you give us all of your information? I will
Yeah.
post everything on the links as well.
Thanks. Yeah, the best place to connect with me is just head over to my website. It's lindseyepperly.com. It's lindseyepperly.com. That's got everything. That's got easy links to ways that you can get in touch with me. That's got links to Who Made You the Boss, to the podcast. So if you like a lot of the content we've been talking about today, that's similar to what I talk about. I'm all about mindset and the journey and the entrepreneurial journey. And yeah, I love connecting with people. So thanks for creating this as kind of a mini mentorship situation.
You're welcome. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for coming on and and being authentic and making yourself available. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sonia.
Thank you, Lindsey, for joining us today and sharing your journey. It's clear that with the right mindset, even the most challenging times can lead to incredible growth and success. Remember, it's not just about surviving, it's about thriving and transforming obstacles into opportunities. And that's a wrap. To our listeners, thank you for joining me on this journey of learning, growth, and inspiration. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite platform and connect with our community on social media. I'd love to hear your feedback, so leave a review and let me know what topics you'd want to explore in future episodes. Remember, the future belongs to those who embrace challenges, adapt with tenacity, and keep pushing forward. Keep growing, keep pivoting, and most importantly, stay tenacious in your pursuits. Thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to bringing you more insightful conversations in our upcoming episodes. This is Sonia signing off, but as always, keep chasing your dreams with tenacity.